Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we're talking all things Colorado Rockies. And look, we've got a really fun one in store. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, share with your mom, your dad, grandfather, grandmother, niece, nephew, you name it. Those three friends that you see on Friday nights, tell them about Rockies Daily as we continue to grow this thing out. But now let's just jump into it. And Thomas Harding gave us a pretty interesting piece on Warren Schaefer, and gave us a little more insight of what the vision is of this club, especially going into 2026. And one of the big things is giving this team a little bit more depth, right? So it's why we saw the signings of Willie Castro. It's why we see this team obviously making different moves, like getting Jake McCarthy in the outfield, and ultimately the idea is this team is trying to just have more overall players that can play and that can be plug and play throughout the season. And I think that was one of the interesting things from this article is they understand that there might be some redundancy, right? Now you have a couple of left-handed outfielders. This is with Mickey Moniak having really a career year. You have a couple of utility players in Castro and Freeman, but that shouldn't be something where you look at and say, oh man, we have too many guys that repeat themselves. Instead, it hopefully gives you more options and more opportunities to plug guys kind of around the diamond. And so, I think a good example is obviously Castro and Freeman. They can both play the outfield and a lot of different parts in the infield. But honestly, that just gives you more utility to work with. It gives you more of an opportunity to plug and play guys in that infield that I think desperately need it. It's a pretty inexperienced infield overall. And now you've got Castro, who will most likely start at second. Freeman, who we've talked about on the show at length, could play first. He could touch in the outfield. And obviously, you're going to deal with injuries. So to have two utility players is actually quite nice because if someone goes down with an injury, you have two guys that are most likely able to play that position. And so for this staff, they've also just mentioned, hey, we want to see what actually works at Coors Field. So you're getting a lot of different types of hitters. And, kind of what we'll note on the first base segment is they're linked to a couple different names, all that provide maybe something a little bit different. And that's kind of what we're seeing from who's on this team right now, is they all just provide something that's a little bit different. I think the one glaring thing is there's no one who's truly elite on this team. You have some really good baseball players and you have some good baseball players, but right now the Rockies don't have anyone that's truly elite. And so when you're in that process where you don't have anyone that's in that caliber, it's more so, okay, well, we don't have anyone elite, but we have 6 really good players or 7 really good players or whatever what those building blocks look like, as you just kind of figure out this roster. So I've mentioned it a couple times on the show. I've really liked the signings and the moves just to show that activity from Josh Burns and Paul De Podesta. And they're not just signing guys just to sign them. They're getting hopefully veteran presence in a locker room that is just really really young and inexperienced, that in a locker room that doesn't want to keep losing, which was encouraging from the show that we talked about yesterday. But we also just got more information that the Rockies are linked to a couple first basemen, Luis Arraez, Nathaniel Lowe, and Dominic Smith. And so you have 3 different options here. And which way the Rockies go will be interesting. My preference would be either Arraez or Lowe. Luis Arraez is interesting just because he is such a great contact hitter, but he doesn't provide much more than that in terms of just overall slugging and power. However, for a team that struck out as much as Colorado did last year, Arraez could be a really interesting option there, because it gives you a very, very solid bat and a lineup that really, outside of 1 or 2 guys, didn't have that. And so to have someone who can get on base often right? Like maybe you put him in front of someone like Hunter Goodman, and give Goodman a chance to just improve his opportunities for RBI opportunities. Arise also just isn't the fastest player either, and defensively, uh, he's just okay. Nathaniel Lowe gives you more power and is a better defender. He's won a Gold Glove, and so that's where it says, hey, you know what, this team could use a little bit more pop in their bat. That's where you go the route of Lowe. And Smith had a decent OPS. He would be a decent option as well. But it just continues the idea that the Rockies really do need to look at, I think, signing a first baseman just because of the overall lack of depth at that position. Even if you said, hey, you know what? We want Tyler Freeman to be the guy in 2026. That's not a bad idea. But you still need someone else there because behind him is really nothing. And so to have actual MLB level talent is important. And based on how the market has reacted to these three names, but especially Luis Arraez, who, he's won, multiple batting titles, a really, really, really good contact hitter. And he's not had his name mentioned really anywhere. And I think that's been the most surprising thing. So because of that, you're probably going to get them on a good deal. We're not spending a ton, which is why I really like the Castro deal as well. And the Michael Lorenzen deal. That's something that you can expect from one of these three guys, right? Now, if they're asking for, 3-4 years, $50 million, then you're like, probably not worth it. But that's not going to be what the asking price is. And so I think it'd be really wise for the Rockies to go and try and target either Arise or Low, especially just because they're just right there. And even if it's a 1 or 2 year deal, it's totally worth it in my opinion. Even if you're thinking, hey, Charlie Condon's right around the corner, you still want to just raise the floor of this team. The floor is really low. The floor goes up when you sign guys like this. It creates better competition. And overall, the team will just be better in general if you sign one of these two guys. And I know you're not expecting to make a playoff push or a World Series run, but you want to be proud of the product that's on the field. And I think you'd be a little bit more proud if you have one of those two guys slotted at first. But regardless, we move on. One of the other interesting things from the article is we got Warren Schaefer saying he really wants to follow the AJ Hinch route. Just because we've seen the success that he's had in recent years in back-to-back playoff appearances for the Tigers. And one of the interesting things is Schaefer has mentioned, hey, you know what, if there's an opportunity to, you have a guy on second and third and, a new reliever comes in, you don't like the matchup, to be able to plug in a new hitter, to be able to plug in someone that gives you a favorable at-bat or matchup. And those are the kind of things that are really refreshing to hear, that, you want to treat it like a chess match, and you want to treat it like every at-bat matters. And it goes just back into that theory is you want to have a bunch of different options that you can bring in a guy, right? Like, let's say Castro gives you 4 good innings, but hey, in this at-bat, we need someone else. Okay, great. At-bat, now we can plug in Freeman to play second or whatever, right? That's an important thing to hear, I think, for Rockies fans, because that will be kind of what we'll talk about a little bit too in the last segment. That will be important for Schaefer. He's probably not going to be as heavily critiqued on wins and losses as he is, hey, how do you build the culture, and what does it look like for you in-game managing, right? Like when it's time to make a tough decision, what are you doing and what route are you taking? And so it's encouraging to hear, hey, you know what? I want to look at the guys where I know it has worked, for teams that have struggled in the past and now that they're seeing success. I think that's a great route for Schaefer to take. I think overall for this team, Schaefer just has a pretty big responsibility. and that is just trying to get the most out of these guys. And it's not just all on him. You obviously look at the coaching staff beneath him, but overall, what Schaefer's able to do, get out of these guys, and the decisions he's able to make. And one of the things that he also mentioned is buy-in. How do you get your guys to buy in? That's really pivotal, especially during a rebuild, because it can be probably very easy for players to say, look, dude, we're just going to lose the next 10 games. We're going to lose 80 games, 90 games, 100 games, 110 games, right? Like, it can be really easy for a player to just kind of throw it in. And one of the encouraging things that we've seen in the offseason is that guys have really seemed to buy in and have seemed to really have positive energy going into the season. But it's one thing to see that in an offseason, right, where you're not actually playing games. It's just like, man, yeah, we're getting jacked. Let's go. It's another one you get hit in the mouth by the Dodgers in a 4-game sweep, and it's, hey, we've lost 8 out of 9. How are we going to respond after that? Those will be the pivotal moments for Schaefer and how he handles this club. And we go into 2026. What's in store for this season? We're getting close. We're less than 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. It's crazy that the season is almost upon us. And, right, like, we just kind of noted on it, but what are actual expectations? Because this season is going to be really difficult for the Rockies. The NL West is extremely loaded. The Giants just made another acquisition. The Dodgers had a great offseason. And, the Diamondbacks, they got really aggressive. And, of course, the Padres will probably be good once again. So, as a Rockies fan and as a team, you look at it and say, man, we are by far the least talented team in the NL West. And we've been the least talented team for the last couple seasons. That doesn't mean there can't be successes, and that doesn't mean you can't play well in the NL West, but it's just going to be a really difficult season. We talk about Schaefer. What does the leash look like on Warren Schaefer, right? First full year. So you would think, oh, he's got a pretty big leash, but you also have a new front office in Josh Burns and Paul De Podesta. And so Warren Schaefer technically isn't their guy. And that's not to say Warren Schaefer can't become their guy. But sometimes front offices, when they come in, they really want to have their staff be entirely their own. And so they've done that with a lot of the different pitching and hitting coaches, but Warren Schaefer has remained. And so that will be a really interesting storyline, I think, going into 2026 is what does that actually look like for, hey, we're giving you a big leash, next couple of years are yours in this rebuild, because that is important. Rebuild years are really important in trusting your staff, but it's also just important of looking at a manager and saying, hey, this is really not working. We don't like what we're seeing. You're out of here. And so that will be a storyline in 2026 because it's going to be a difficult year. The Rockies are probably going to lose quite a few games, and it's just a matter of will they have trust in Schaefer kind of leading the way for this team. I personally hope so. You obviously want him to succeed, but that will be an interesting storyline. How some of these players develop and how you grade some of these players. It's just really interesting. You go onto like Baseball Savant and you look at some of these Rockies players and you go, wow, hey, they've got some nice, decent metrics, right? And it's like, oh, hey, his slugging looks okay. And then you click on some of the elite players in baseball, and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's what it looks like to just be good in just about every category. And so how do you develop some of these players to just improve beyond just like the one or two things that they're pretty good at? And that will be interesting, right? Like you look at Chase Dollander, incredible fastball velocity, and has great arm talent. How do you develop and how does he pitch so it can be more than that? So he can actually be a pitcher that's feared whenever he's starting on the bump. Those are all just like different questions you're going to ask yourself in 2026. This segment's really about just like questions that we will get answers to one way or the other. you hope it's a lot of positive answers, but there will be some negative answers too. It's just going to be what's in store for this season. So overall, I'm excited for this season. Cautiously optimistic in terms of it's just going to be a really refreshing year, I think, because of the newness and all these, this different front office and some of the different things we see implemented. But there's also going to be some hard weeks and maybe some hard months of the season, and you just have to brace yourself for that. But I think 2026 will be a building block year for the Rockies, and hopefully after the season there isn't too long of a lockout with some of the looming things over with salary cap and everything like that. But be able to use 2026 for this team, for the players, front office, and then build on that. Those will all be really big things as we really kind of steamroll into this season. So I hope you liked the episode. Hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Really appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.